Hi, I'm Dawn McTeigue, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's September 22nd, 2020. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Dawn McTeigue. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Dawn is based in Calgary, Alberta. She's the interior and cover artist for a series called DiVinica, published by Rothic and co-created by J.P. Roth and Dawn. Dawn also creates covers for a variety of publishers, including Rothic, DC, Image, Zenescope, Aspen, Valiant, Dark Horse Dynamite, and BDI, and you've probably seen her covers on Lady Death and Lady Mechanica. So without further ado, here's my chat with Dawn McTeigue.
Dawn McTeigue, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
I appreciate your time. So what I normally do to start the conversation is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book you read?
The very first comic book that I found was Gen 13 by J. Scott Campbell. And I grew up overseas, so I had seen a lot of manga and anime comics, but I couldn't really read them, right? So I just looked at all the art and loved on it, but that was about as far as I could go, because I couldn't read hiragana and katakana and all the Japanese writing. So then I found J. Scott Campbell's Gen 13, and oh my God, the art really, really grabbed me. And I was like, okay, I need to find more of this coolness. So then from there, I, found Top Cow and Aspen Comics and, got into, specifically, I was really interested in all the art. So I would just pour through pages and look at all the art and stuff. It was just fascinating to me. I mean, it still is. Was is an incorrect word.
Right. So that leads me to my next question as to who or what inspires you to create today.
Wow, today I am just inspired by so many artists. I follow artists on my Instagram page mostly, and I think I follow over 1,000 of them. And
Wow.
Everybody inspires me in some way, even if it's a style of art that literally has nothing to do with what I do. Mm-hmm. It's still just so inspiring. But as far as in our world or in the comic world, the artists that have inspired me and have helped me a lot are J. Scott Campbell and Ebas, Eric Basildua. So I've learned a lot from them by observation, by buying their sketchbooks, and then also they both have been gracious enough to answer art questions for me or critique my work if I can manage to beg some help at a convention or whatever. So I'm incredibly grateful to them, and they still inspire me to this day, the work that they can do and the way that they can not only draw human characters well, but they can draw monsters and buildings and everything that is required in the field of comic art. They do so well, and it blows my mind.
That's cool. Good stuff. So I'm talking to you and others under the context of the Edmonton Expo. I know there's been a lot of shows that were canceled this year, and Edmonton Expo was one of them. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about what you were planning to exhibit at that particular event.
Well, I had actually ordered a bunch of extra comic books for this series that I work on called DiVinica, and I was planning to give them away to everyone at Edmonton Expo. So I've got 2 massive boxes of them in my house, which I'm happy to have, but I was really planning to be handing them out. So that's kind of sad because it's sort of something you need to hand over to somebody physically in a lot of ways, or be able to talk with them about the book, my thought process, all of that sort of stuff. So that was the main thing I had planned for all of the conventions, but for Edmonton Expo I specifically had some boxes here with me.
So is it available now for people to purchase from you?
I do have it on my website, yes.
Okay.
So it's there, and those were the 2 books that I was going to have and have them as freebies and giveaways. It's much easier to do that when you're,
Right.
person to person. So yeah, I do have them on my website though, yes.
Great, good. Now, I presume you've been to Edmonton Expo in the past, so I'm wondering if you have any favorite memories you can share with us.
I do actually. So yes, I have been to Edmonton Expo a few other times. It's not very far from me here in Calgary, so I'm always happy to go. And probably one of the most outstanding memories for me, and that isn't to take away from all the amazing people that I have met at the conventions and, who are so supportive of my work and kind and just awesome to chat with and see everybody's costumes or commissions that they've gotten from other artists. Like, there's so many things that make a convention special, memorable, and wonderful. But one thing that happened that only happened at Edmonton Expo for me was Carrie Fisher was walking around the floor, and she was such a wonderful person, and I had seen her at other conventions, and so it wasn't just Edmonton Expo that she did this. When she would have a break, she'd get herself a snack and she'd just walk through Artist Alley and buy prints from people and, talk to the artist or the creator. She would buy little pieces of jewelry. I mean, she went around a few other conventions that I went to and just made people's lives. Not because she bought something, but just Carrie Fisher came up and was chitty-chatting with me. Mind blown, because most of us that are working at a convention can't really stop and take, the few hours that it is normally to wait in line and all of that. If you don't have someone that you're kind of working the booth with, or in my case, I need to sign whatever it is that I worked on. So it's not like I can have someone sub in and sign for me or whatever. So I don't get to go around and see people. And so she was seeing all kinds of artists and creators and craft makers and stuff like that at the convention. And then she stopped by my table.
Wow.
And oh my God. And she comes up to me and totally took me by surprise. Because again, you can see her on a talk show or, she, in the back of your mind that, like, yes, she's so funny and she's got a great sense of humor and stuff. But when she walks up to you and her first words out of her mouth were, "I want the most naked thing you've ever drawn." I was just like, say what now? I mean, this is the queen of the universe talking to me. I don't know. I don't have anything super naked. And she's like, well, I want that one. And I want that one. And then let me see something else. And I didn't have what she wanted. So she took my display print off the wall.
Oh my.
And then she's like, here, okay, let me pay you. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have done this. I keep going back and forth, but I didn't want her to pay me. Come on, it's just an honor that she's standing there. And so I was like, would you mind if I took a picture with you, please? And so she was like, okay, fine, And so I got to take a picture with her, and it was just the most amazing memory. And she was the nicest person, just the nicest.
Yeah, she's a class act, that's for sure.
Yeah, big time.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. It's a great memory. Well, I want to talk a bit about one of your projects that's ongoing called DiVinica. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that book for those not familiar with it.
Yay, thank you. Yes, I would love to. So DiVinica is a story that is not just a modern or futuristic, really, story. It ties into goddesses, but from what we're trying to do is take goddesses from all different pantheons of mythology and tie them in with our lead character, whose name is Davinica. And I don't want to give away everything about it because some of this stuff hasn't come out yet. And people from my live streams know that I am the queen bean spiller. I spoil everything. So I'm going to try to keep my big mouth shut. But then also, the story and the way that we're trying to do it is to have, like I said, goddesses from all different pantheons of mythology, which makes it so fun and interesting for me. I mean, I hope it's fun and interesting for the readers as well, to take different histories, different regions and looks and all of that, and integrate that into our story. And so how the goddesses weave in with our main character, Davinica, is something that will be played out over the next few issues that are coming out. So like we're really going to be tying it all together in like issue 6, which is what we're heading into now. And it'll start to become clear how it all works together. The main character wakes up many years in the future. And at the time when we were like developing this, COVID hadn't happened, but like really what the story is about is it's quite post-apocalyptic. She just wakes up, has no memory of getting there, doesn't know why, but pretty much the whole world just breaks down. Science stops working, the plants stop growing, the sun has cooled, and she literally is just in this place and doesn't know why, can't really remember what happened, but is starting to piece together her own story. And then she's going to start piecing together what are all these dreams or visions or traveling that she's having into these other times, and how it all fits in with her own journey and what it is she's supposed to do. So boy, I'm excited about it. And I'm sorry. I know I ramble on about this story because for starters, it's just so fun for me to work on. And then secondly, because we are going into different regions and stuff, I've had to learn new styles of art to be respectful to that region and the histories within there. So I'm doing all of the interior work traditional. And when I started in comics, I am by trade a penciler. So doing the traditional colors and stuff is something that's very new for me. And so I literally had to learn how to paint for this series. It's not like I was a painter and then started working on this series. Nope. For issue 4, J.P. Roth was like, this is about the Chinese goddess Magu. And J.P. Roth is the publisher and the writer of the story.
Right.
She was like, this is Chinese history and mythology, and I think it would really look good if we did it in watercolor. And I'm like, I don't know how to watercolor. And she's like, well, learn. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And I'm so glad she had that kind of trust in me to like learn on the fly, because I'm still learning, but I really enjoy it. And it gives it a good look, I think. So I'm excited.
That must be a challenge in a good way for you, as it keeps you on your toes, doesn't become a routine, that there's something fresh that you bring to it with every issue. That's great.
Yeah, I have like a 2-minute attention span, so it's very good for me.
Well, that leads me a bit into you've touched on it, but about your creative process. And I know that on your website you've listed some of the tools that you use and talk a bit about, and you've got a YouTube channel, which is great. You explain how you do things, but I'm wondering if you could just verbalize a bit how you go from the initial concept to the finished page.
Well, I'm all over the map with that one for sure. But for covers, for instance, and this is covers that I'm doing in the more traditional comic style. Right. So maybe like I recently finished one for Red Sonja. And so with that, I do a really rough, tiny little layout. So I'm talking like, 1.5 by 2 inches. And it's a glorified stick figure. But it's just the basic idea so that there are poses. And with any comic book publisher, the standard is that you send in 2 or 3 ideas. So those are generally called layouts. And from those 2 or 3 ideas, each one is a slightly different pose or a different setting or a slightly different format within that clause, I guess, of your assignment. It's to draw Red Sonja, or it's to draw Lady Death, or it's, whatever the case may be. And then the editor will respond to you and say, okay, I pick number 1, for instance. And then I flesh that out a little bit more and make it a pencil sketch. So it's not refined, but it's, they can see basically what the character is going to look like, what facial expression you've given them, body proportions, for instance. All of that stuff is in the sketch. That goes for approval again. And then you get back any changes or not, and then I ink it, then I scan it, and then I'll digitally color it. I use a Wacom Cintiq. So it's kind of like a a fancy monitor that you can color directly on. And then for DiVinica, I pretty much just do a really rough sketch and I talk with JP Roth on the phone about it. And then most of the work is really handled in the final paint. So that's sort of, there's no undo. So it's a little bit more tricky, but I still really enjoy it. I love the texture of it and how, watercolor just surprises you. So you can't, I'm such a control freak and watercolor kind of breaks my brain a little bit, but it's been really good. So those are like two almost completely opposite process styles. But thankfully, I love that the comic book world is really expanding to allow for art styles and mediums that are not technically comic format in the traditional sense, but they are becoming that way because, it's like very welcoming to whatever style you may have or whatever medium you choose to work in. Like, it's being embraced in the comic book format as kind of a new format, and it's really cool.
Do you have a preference whether you like to go for the somewhat digital route or all traditional?
My preference is traditional. Digital coloring is something I really only picked up doing as part of my process in 2017. So traditional, be it just in the way of working on paper and drawing on paper, is far more my comfort zone than there's a little bit of a divide still when you're working on digital. And that's not to diss digital, that's just me and my personal comfort zone and preferences. But there are pluses and minuses to both of them, even though traditional and the feel of the paper is far more comfortable for me. There is something really glorious about the undo button and the history.
Right.
You can just go back. So there's pluses and minuses to both. But yeah, probably in all of my rambling, the place where I'm more comfortable is traditional on paper.
That's cool. We talked about DiVinica and some of your cover work. I'm wondering if you have any projects in the works that you can talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I am currently working on DiVinica. What I'm working on right now is setting up a art book. So it's the art of DiVinica, and it's going to encompass the first 4 issues. And some of them are out of print, so they're really hard to find. So maybe a lot of people haven't even seen the art, or there's concept art that was never published. So I'm working on an Art of DiVinica book, and I am going to be doing one of the covers, and Eric Basaldua very kindly agreed to be doing the special cover. So that's so exciting. It's going to be a hardback art book, and we're going to kickstart it probably sometime early in 2021.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, good. My first Kickstarter.
That's tremendous. Well, that would be my next question is where can people find you online and on social media where they can learn more about this Kickstarter and your other projects?
The best places to find me online is first my website, which is dawnmcteigue.com. I also have an email list. And in that email list, once a week, I will send out an email that's kind of explaining what I've been working on, what I'm planning to be doing next. I do touch a lot on the process because, my week may have been filled with revisions on cover art or interior pages and where I'm at. So if anyone is interested in that, please feel free to join my email list. And then also I live stream about 9 hours a week to show the process of creating comic art. So any publisher that will give me permission to live stream whatever it is I may be working on, which is really cool of them because NDAs are a thing, and they give me a temporary release from that to show whoever happens to be watching what it is I'm working on and, all the steps in the process. So I do that on Facebook Live at Art of Dawn McTeigue, my Facebook page, and on Twitch, which is just my name, Dawn McTeigue. And I live stream to both at the same time. So please feel free to join in if you have any art-related questions or, how should you get started? What tools would I recommend? All of that I will cover, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. Helping other artists is really one of my life goals, and I really want to. Time is never on our side, so I have a hard time answering personal messages and DMs and stuff about art questions, but I can take them on Twitch. That's what I'm there for. So I'm more than happy to help.
Great. Well, Dawn, those are all the questions that I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
I would just like to say that I am so grateful to everyone that follows comic art and supports comics in any way that you can. Thank you so much. I know that these are rough times for everybody, but I think as long as we stick together and keep our chins up and smiles on our faces, we're going to get through it. And, conventions will be back someday, and then we can all be so happy for them.
Thanks to Dawn for the chat. You can discover more about Dawn on Twitter at DAWN_MCTEIGUE and on Instagram at Dawn McTeigue and online at dawnmcteigue.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at TrueNorthComics. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2020.